Hello everybody, this is Jake, your resident content cowboy here.
Yeehaw.
Sorry, obviously I'm Jake 3 at this point, and I don't know. There was a time when I was an assassin, and now I am haunted by the fact that I might get assassinated if I have conspiracy theories. Boy, if you haven't watched that video, that makes no sense at all. It's Friday, and you know what that means. It's time for a tier list. No, but wait, I thought Mondays were for tier lists. Yeah, but I want to do it today because I got some opinions about Blissey. I think it'll be fun. Okay, but it's Mondays or tier lists, not Friday. Look, I don't want to argue about it. Then don't argue and just don't do it.
Just let the man do his tier list.
You see him too? This has to stop. All right, today I wanted to do a tier list based on what I think is the most viable in the meta right now, the best of the best, what they would be using, what Blissey has done to the meta, and where all the Pokemon sit after their recent buffs and nerfs and everything. So let's head on over to that tier list and let's talk. Okay, here we are. On this tier list, we have 5 categories. We have the God tier. As we always say, there can only be one God, praise his name or her name, okay? S tier, A tier, B tier, and let's talk. So again, this tier list is just based on the highest rank play, what I think is viable. It doesn't mean that whatever Pokemon you're using inside this list can't be very, very good, and it doesn't mean that someone couldn't pick a Pokemon on this list that I don't particularly like and absolutely wreck me in a game. It happens all the time, so don't get discouraged if you see your Pokemon is near the bottom of this list. Just know that that means when you're playing higher ranked games, you might not be fulfilling the needs of that role. And that's what I think is most important when you're looking at some of the top ranked play. What Pokemon actually fill that role better than others? And I'll kind of explain why I think Pokemon fill it better than others. I made a list a little while back and someone mentioned, hey, you're saying this Pokemon's better than this one, but you're not exactly saying why, and I'll try to more clearly talk about why I think certain Pokemon are better than others and why that moves them up the list. So again, in theory, let's say you have 5 attacking Pokemon who do the same thing. We don't have that in this game right now. The game is actually really new, so we don't have a ton of Pokemon that do each specific thing. But you have 5 attacking Pokemon that are all the same. They all kind of function like Cinderace, right? Let's just say that that's a reality. And out of those 5, 2 of them happen to deal the most attack. The way they work with crits is extremely well, and they're able to get themselves out of sticky situations, kind of like Cinderace is in general. But let's just say that. And let's say the other 3 are good, but they don't have as much damage output. They have different utility moves. I would probably, in that scenario, say that the 2 Pokemon that fill that role best are higher than the other Pokemon. Not that the other ones aren't viable, it's just that when someone fills the role best, you're gonna see that person all the time. So that's kind of the thought process when you get into the higher ranked play. It's not that certain Pokemon are unplayable, but when you compare them to others, they just get edged out. And when you're playing at the top level of this game, you wanna have every advantage possible. So I'm gonna try to make this list make as much sense as possible and hopefully not hurt too many people's feelings, but there are just some Pokemon that can't hang, in my opinion, when you go into the master rank. So let's start here. Okay, where do I want to start? I'll start with something in the S tier. Why not? Or should I? I will. Last patch, I said that Snorlax was God tier. I actually still think Snorlax is without question the best defender in Pokemon Unite. He's absolutely incredible. His block is amazing. It's probably the best move in the game. There are a few moves that are extremely good, but the utility you get from block is unparalleled in this game. There's only kind of one reason that I'd say something else is God tier right now. But Snorlax is still amazing, even with the nerf, the best defender by far. The other defenders are good. Actually, the defender role in general is not bad. All 3 of them are pretty darn good, but Snorlax is just too useful. I have a video, I don't know if it's up on my channel right now, but I just have a really short video of Snorlax's block, and it's pretty silly what happens because of it. As far as Flail and Yawn are concerned, I think it's cool that they nerfed them, but they're not as good. Heavy Slam knocks people up. It also helps you position much better for block. I don't think Flail is optimal. I think the Heavy Slam block Snorlax is still an S tier choice inside this game. So let's talk about the other two defenders while we're here. We'll talk about Slowbro and we will talk about Crustle. Crustle got a buff, but not to Crustle's most used abilities, to Crustle's other abilities, Rock Tomb and what's the other one called? Stealth Rock. Rock Tomb and Stealth Rock. And then Slowbro got a nerf, which I'll never understand. Its Scald got a buff. Scald's terrible. At least I think it's terrible. I've heard some arguments for why Scald is good, and it's that it kind of lowers enemies attack in the area, but it's, you know, it's just this area attack. I know it has a really low cooldown, which is kind of cool. Maybe some amazing players will start using it. I don't think so. I think it's very odd that they nerfed Slowbro, but I still think he's very good, and I think Crustle, compared to the other two, is not as good. I really don't think so, and it's because Crustle still doesn't have the amount of crowd control that Slowbro gets from Surf and Telekinesis and that Snorlax gets from Heavy Slam and Block. I love playing Crustle. It's actually it's quickly rising to one of my favorite Pokemon to play right now, and again, this doesn't mean it's not viable, it just means it's not as strong as the other choices. I could totally see teams running multiple defenders right now, but for the sake of this list, if I were to rank them, it would be S, A, and B. I could see some people saying, I love my Crustle, and I do too, and it's really, really good. But just in the highest possible level play, I think it's the least optimal choice, and it's because of that crowd control. Being able to have two crowd control moves with Snorlax and its Unite move, kind of, and then with Slowbro being able to have its Surf, its Telekinesis as well, and then an additional, essentially, Telekinesis with its Unite move. I just think that amount of crowd control, it does the job of Defender better than Crustle. But I could see running a 2-defender comp, honestly. I don't think that would be bad at all. Let's start talking about the all-rounders. We could start talking about the all-rounders. That would be kind of fun. So let me just pull them all up here. We have Charizard, Garchomp, Lucario, and Machamp. So the all-rounders fill an interesting role in this right now. You could have a match without an all-rounder and run a second defender. I could totally see you doing that, but also all-rounders are pretty dang useful, and a few of them are really, really good. One in particular is the best. I'll start talking about that one, and that is Lucario. I think Lucario is still the best all-rounder in the game, and it's mainly because he just assassinates people. He was one of the best assassins inside the game right now. He's also really sturdy. He hangs around well in lane. He's just the kind of person who helps you clean up team fights really well. Incredibly strong, and man, if you're near Lucario and you have low health, it's such a sad moment when you see Lucario walking out, charging up its power-up punch, and you go, no! You have to pop your eject button or you're done. So I think Lucario is the best all-rounder right now. The rest of the all-rounders are in a weird place. Machamp is amazing. I think Machamp is really, really good, but I just think if I had a team, I would probably just, I don't know, I think Machamp is so good, but I might even run a second defender before I ran Machamp. And it's because, what do I really want out of Machamp? The big thing I want is Machamp's submission. I want Machamp to run and grab somebody. I want him to grab one of their carries and do something mean to it, right? That's what I want out of Machamp. And Machamp has like one of the best Unite moves in the game. So I think Machamp is really, really good, but I just think when you're looking at team comps, there are other roles that I would even have instead of Machamp. And that's kind of the weird place that the all-rounders are in general here, is that, well, you have someone like Garchomp and you have someone like Charizard. And sadly, there are just other Pokemon that aren't even in this role that would fit better on a team than these Pokemon. But to rank the all-rounders, I think it would look something like this. I think Machamp would be the best because of its CC. The Champ would be the best because you can run submission, you can grab an enemy carry, you can stop them from getting away. Its Unite move is really incredible when used correctly, so I think Machamp would be considered the best. That's what I would say out of these all-rounders. And then you have Charizard and you have Garchomp. I don't think either of them fall into the let's talk category, which is just, well, kind of they do. Here's the truth. I don't think right now in the top meta you would ever see Charizard or Garchomp. I don't think you would. Maybe Garchomp, maybe. And both of these Pokemon, again, totally, you can play all the way up to Master Rank with them. You can still win in Master Rank with them. But at the top level, here are the issues with both Charizard and Garchomp. We'll start with Charizard. Charizard takes a long while to kind of get online and become really strong. Once it becomes strong, it feels very Unite move dependent. So if its Unite move is down, it's not going to be very useful inside of a fight. It's just not powerful enough. Once its Unite move is up, it can really do some damage, and you can grab, one of the enemy carries. Like you could pick up their Cinderace or Greninja and just slam them into the ground. So that's really positive, but it has a really slow build up, and it's just not that powerful, you know? I would want someone with more power on the team than Charizard. And now Garchomp got a buff, which is good. Garchomp needed a buff. Garchomp needed a lot of health. Garchomp, I really like Garchomp, and I really like playing Garchomp. And when Garchomp is doing its thing, it is so fun to have on your team. It is. But most of the time, Garchomp is in this horrible position where it takes it a really long time to level up. So you think, okay, we'll put it in the jungle. But if you put it in the jungle, with what's going on in the meta right now, you are now sacrificing the jungle for a Garchomp instead of someone much better in the jungle, like one of the attackers that we'll talk about later. So the problem is you need Garchomp to be fed. Garchomp's hungry, hungry boy's got to eat. And the problem with Garchomp is for Garchomp to get fed, it means someone else can't get as much of that experience, and that person will probably be one of your superstar attackers. You need one of your superstar attackers to be the highest level, if possible, on your team. That way you can do the most damage for some of the later team fights that pop up. So while I like both these Pokemon, and actually All-Rounder is a role, I really enjoy playing it, I think both Charizard and Garchomp fall into the B tier. I would like to play Garchomp more, probably, maybe with the buff, Garchomp is better than Charizard, but I'm really not sure, and part of the problem is that Garchomp is melee. And melee is just, it's just harder. You have to be closer to deal damage. That's, I mean, I'm not saying anything that obviously you don't know from that, but when you're melee and you're comparing that to someone like an attacker who is not, there's just all this time where you're not as viable. And if we retreat from you, it's easier to get away because your attack radius is so small. Increasing Garchomp's speed, I think, helps with its sticking power, so I think that is good. And I really would like to see it more. Hopefully its potential is still being unlocked and we can see more Garchomp in higher ranked play. But when I see a Garchomp on my team, I just think, well, that's someone who needs a lot of experience. It's not going to be easy to give it to them, especially if we're running a comp that is more viable, like an attacker in the jungle. Part of the meta right now is just attackers are in the jungle. They have to be, because they clear the jungle so well and they need all the experience. So that's where we're at with the all-rounders right now. I think Lucario is still S tier. Garchomp might teeter up into A tier, but I'll need to see more from Garchomp before I say that for sure. Of course, again, a specific team comp that works around it, you could see Garchomp shred people, but I still think Garchomp is a little underwhelming. Let's talk about, we can do attackers right now. Yeah, let's do attackers. So I'm gonna just set all these attackers out here. We'll put them here, 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 here. Lots of attackers. And you know what? The attacker role is actually doing well. We need more attackers. We need more of every Pokemon in this game, but a lot of these attackers are pretty darn strong right now. So they're kind of split into two camps. You have the melee, no, excuse me, not melee. You have the auto attack damage carry Pokemon, and then you have sort of your more bursty mage Pokemon, and then you have one that's kind of in between a little bit, more of a disabler auto attacker. So kind of magey, but there's really one build that works for this Pokemon that I'm thinking of right now. Let's start with someone like Greninja. We all know that Greninja has been getting so much play lately. It's like taken the crown from Cinderace in so many games. I see more and more teams running Greninja instead of Cinderace. Greninja's awesome. Even though Greninja got a slight nerf, its Water Shuriken got a buff, but let's face it, that's not the best move for Greninja. The best move for Greninja is Surf. It is a, pentakill move or 5 KO, whatever you'd call it in this game. It is a full team KO move. Every time you knock out a Pokemon with Surf, your Surf recharges immediately. I personally have been fortunate enough to do full team KOs with it. I see people do it. Greninja is very, very, very good, and it can still be that auto attacker and keep range. I really, really like Greninja when it's played well. When Greninja's played poorly, like any of the hard carries, when they're played poorly, you just have, your team can't do anything because they're not getting any damage output. So I think Greninja is absolutely an S tier choice. Let me talk about someone I love that I think is one of the lower choices in the game, and that's Pikachu. I really, really love Pikachu, but Pikachu needs a buff. So Pikachu's early game is super solid, but as the game goes on, its damage output is just way too low. It's so low for late game stuff that it makes it really hard to want to run Pikachu. Now, it works well for about the first 7 minutes of the game, basically. But the last 3 minutes, especially around that last Zapdos fight, its damage output is just too low. It's really unfortunate, and it doesn't really do much in the realm of crowd control. You get a quick stun. Its Unite move is really weak, unfortunately. I'm actually confused why its Unite move is so weak. I think more than anything, its Unite move needs a buff, and then its late game damage needs a slight buff. And then at that point, it would rise to at least A tier. But right now, I have to say it's one of the weaker attacker choices, even though it's one of my favorite Pokemon to play. Early and mid game, Pikachu is so mean. He's so mean, but late game, he really falls off. So let's take a look at another person that I think is really great. One of my absolute favorite Pokemon to play, Cramorant. I believe Cramorant is an A tier Pokemon. It's, in some ways, I'd say it's probably the best sort of caster mage type Pokemon with Surf and Hurricane. And it's because both moves not only deal a ton of damage, but they also have crowd control elements. So Hurricane knocks people up, Surf knocks people up, a small amount, but twice. So I think both of those moves are really incredible. That's the build I would run on Cramorant, by the way. I know some people say that Dive is pretty good, but no, I don't think so. I think it's Surf and I think it's Hurricane. And if you run those correctly, it's just it's someone dealing damage and it's a ton of extra CC. So that's why Cram is higher than Pikachu if you're running a Pokemon like this. And not to mention, Cramorant's Unite move can be game changing. It's a brutal Unite move when used correctly, and your team makes sure that they kind of stay in the Unite move, but also don't focus you down. Ooh, it's unbelievable. I think Cramorant's an A tier Pokemon. It's not S because you don't need it. You don't have to have Cramorant to win, but you do need someone like Greninja to win a match for the most part. In high ranked play, you do. Let's talk about Venusaur. Venusaur, I feel like teeters between A and B, and it's because of its Solar Beam buff. Someone who's really amazing with Venusaur, they're actually pretty dang good right now, and just the amount of damage they can do from such incredible range, I almost want to leave them A tier. I almost want to leave it as an A tier caster right now. It's really, really good. Its other build I don't think is viable in high ranked play, but Solar Beam, especially with how low its cooldown gets, not only is it good for stealing Zapdos, but it does huge amounts of damage if you catch people in it. I feel like it's under Cramorant for me, so I could kind of see it going B, but it's definitely a more solid choice than Pikachu right now. I'm gonna leave Venusaur at a low A tier choice. And again, the reason it's great is because of the massive amount of solar beam damage. The reason it's not so great is because outside of that, I don't think it's very useful. Its Unite move is okay. And its little, I don't know what it's called, poison little area attack. I should know the name of the move, but I don't know it off the top of my head. It's good, and it's what I run on Venusaur, those two moves, but it doesn't have the crowd control of Cramorant. Its Unite move isn't as good. It kind of pales in comparison. Because of that, it could be B tier, but as a caster, I think one of these two, well, so now here's the next tough part. I think maybe I do move Venusaur down to B tier, and here's why. Alolan Ninetales. Alolan Ninetales is either an S tier or A tier attacker. I kind of think it's S tier. Maybe it is. Here's the thing. Alolan Ninetales, it just auto attacks people and freezes them and does area damage and puts a little field where it takes less damage being inside it. It buffs allies. It's kind of a support-y attacker. Like, you need still your AD carry, but I don't know. I still think Ninetales is actually an S tier choice. I think Ninetales is really, really amazing. Even with some of the things that make Ninetales a little worse, there are actually things now that make Ninetales a little better. So for the time being, I kind of think Ninetales is S tier. I do. I just think it's so good. It's so good. It's got a stun. It's so good. And the build you would run on Ninetales, the best build right now, is the Aurora Veil and Dazzling Gleam. It's also such a brutal bully early in lane. Because Ninetales is so good, it makes it hard to want to choose Cramorant or Cramorant or Venusaur sometimes. And this is what might knock Venusaur down because, yeah, okay, look, I could see you still running Venusaur. Ugh. Part of me just really wants to move Venusaur down to B tier, but I feel bad about it because I actually think really good Venusaurs are really good. Really good Venusaurs are really good. What a thought-provoking statement, Jake. Huh. Someone who's really good with something is really good. Wow. I don't know how I come up with it. Cinderace. Cinderace got nerfed. So Cinderace was an S tier Pokemon, and after the nerf, which is why more people play Greninja, Cinderace is still an S tier Pokemon. Cinderace is amazing. Cinderace and Greninja are both incredible. In fact, having them both on a team is a perfectly fine choice. They work well with what's happening in the meta right now. I think I see more Greninjas and I get it. I'm fine with conceding that maybe Greninja's a little better right now. I think it's getting a lot of play, but I still think Cinderace is one of the best Pokemon in the game without question. It's just damage. It's tons of damage output, insane amounts of damage output. It just chunks everything down, and you need it, especially late game. Its early game is a little weak, so is Greninja, but you need it. You need it late game. Cinderace is absolutely amazing. Gardevoir. Gardevoir, this might be my most controversial choice on the list, but I think Gardevoir is B tier, higher than Pikachu. But the problem with Gardevoir is it needs so much experience. It's a lot like Garchomp and Charizard, and it just needs so much to get going. It has to be fed so much. I've played against some amazing Gardevoir who rock the game, but I would always rather see Ninetales on the team than Gardevoir. I'd always rather see Cramorant. Venusaur is questionable. I do think Venusaur is actually maybe a little bit better right now. Okay, here's what I think. I think the best player is probably, I don't know, because those snipes. I'm just not in love with Gardevoir right now. I don't like it. It takes so long to get good. And yeah, that's why I have it in B tier, is just because it's so much experience it needs to finally get online. And then once it does, I don't know. It's not like the nukes that it's getting are just shutting down the enemy team so hard. It's good. It's good. The thing about all of these, they're viable, but I just think it's one of the least viable attackers in my opinion right now. I could see someone saying they'd much rather have it than Venusaur, but when you got those really good Venusaur snipes and Venusaur is better in lane earlier, I don't know. I think Gardevoir is B tier right now, and I think it's because Late, it can be amazing, but early, it can really struggle. So you have to have a team that really nurtures it. And I would rather give that experience to Greninja or Cinderace. I would much rather give it to them. Those are our attackers. Now let's talk. This would be a good time to talk. Let's talk about speedsters. Okay, speedsters. I'm going to set you all right here for now. Speedsters are not great right now. And it's the way the game is designed. It's because they're really frail and they want to go in the jungle. And instead of having a speedster in the jungle, you should absolutely have Cinderace or Greninja in the jungle. Why would you want the experience going to someone like Absol, Gengar, Talonflame, or Zeraora who don't carry hard late game, as opposed to Cinderace or Greninja who carry really, really hard late game? So it's because attackers are so good at the jungle and so good when they become over leveled that the speedsters are in this really unfortunate position in the game right now. High ranked play, I feel like at least 50% of the games, I don't even see a speedster chosen. Maybe even more than 50% of games, no one chooses speedster. And it's just because when you are competing against another Pokemon for that same role and you're losing, there isn't a good choice for them. They're pretty rough in lane. Almost all of them are weak in lane. I know some people are having some, luck with Gengar in the lane, but here's just the unfortunate thing. A speedster late game, every single one of them. I'll talk about each one. Absol, late game, pretty darn weak. Good early and mid game, but pretty darn weak. It doesn't do much around those last few minutes of the game when it's time to fight over Zapdos or, kind of figure out what's happening. Are we trying to do some quick scores? That's really where they shine, I guess. Are those quick scores? Maybe. But for that, I'd rather have an all-rounder or something like that with a score shield on. So all of them, I feel like, hang out in this category right now. And I wish I could put them somewhere else. I like all of them for different reasons. I see some amazing Absol players. Gengar, I feel like, is still pretty good, even with the nerf. Talonflame, if you're running a specific team around Talonflame, I could see putting Talonflame in one of these categories, maybe A or B. But in general, all of them have they are cursed with the fact that they are in this role, and this role is not as viable. I would rather have an attacker in the jungle, and I would not really ever want them in lane. So that's where all the speedsters hang out in the meta right now. That's what I think. Yeah, and then the top play. And again, this doesn't mean that if you're one of the best Zeraora players in the world, you can't be amazing. You absolutely could. But I just think in this meta, we need to give experience to people who need experience. And that are these two attackers right here, Greninja and Cinderace, for the most part. Let's talk about supports. Support is a stacked role, man. These Pokemon are good. I'll move them into the Let's Talk area just for now. Obviously, this is the Blissey patch. Blissey was just released, and without question, they released a pretty beastly Pokemon. The question was, so you had Eldegoss, who was hardcore lock every single time, best support in the game. And this is, I'm taking us back a little ways here. And then you had Wigglytuff and Mr. Mime, who were probably confusingly hanging out in B tier or even into the Let's Talk tier, and Blissey didn't exist. Eldegoss was the best by far. It wasn't even close. Then you nerf Eldegoss and you buff Mr. Wigglytuff. I was gonna say Mr. Wigglytuff that whole time. So we have a Goss nerf, Ryan Gosling got nerfed, and we have a Mr. Wigglytuff buff, which kind of moved Wigglytuff up. Mime was still good. Mime is just one of those Pokemon that if you're amazing with Mr. Mime, you're amazing, but everyone else is terrible with Mr. Mime. I hate when I see someone pick Mr. Mime on my team, not because we can't win, but because oftentimes they're just not very good with Mr. Mime in comparison to how much more beneficial they could be with one of the other Pokemon. Mr. Mime is dealing damage and it's putting up barriers. Its Unite move can be pretty good in the right situations, but in general, when I want a supporter on my team, I want someone who's keeping my team alive and healing. Wigglytuff is weird because Wigglytuff is almost just another defender, really, and a good one at that. Its double slap is good. Its rollout's pretty good, but I think it's more of kind of a meme build. Its sing is great. You walking with the enemy team and putting multiple people to sleep, basically giving multiple people a stun in that moment, it's great. So this is kind of where I would have said the meta was before Blissey, is somewhere like this. And now Blissey has entered the meta. A new challenger has entered, and it's Blissey. And Blissey is really, really good. Without belaboring the point any longer or doing another word that I'm going to use incorrectly, Blissey is God tier, in my opinion right now. I think it's the new hotness in the game. I will have to see if it shakes out like that fully, but here is why Blissey is God tier in this game. It's got the heals, which Eldegoss kind of lost, okay? So you've got these amazing amount of heals. It also has the ability, if you want to take this route, to protect your allies from hindrances. I think that is a big brain, high level play, really, really high level, and you've got to be very good to nail it. If you could, maybe the best of the best would take that move, just because being able to make sure one of your carries can't get locked down with any CC is insanely important. But playing the soft boiled build, you have an incredible amount of heal to give your team. And then you have the move Helping Hand. And this whole meta, I feel like, is kind of, in my opinion, based around Helping Hand right now as far as supports are concerned. And here's why I would say Blissey is better than Eldegoss at its job. So Eldegoss has Cotton Guard, which is very good. It gives you a shield, but the healing's a little lower. I still like it for setting up team fights. It's not bad. And you can use it a lot, so people have shields a lot. But the healing from Blissey is huge. It's specified to one Pokemon, but it's such a big amount that sometimes you're healing someone away from being KO'd, where the shield from Eldegoss just isn't enough of a shield to stop them from being focused down. So I think the healing is a little better on Blissey, even though Cotton Guard's still really solid. Then your other move with Eldegoss is Pollen Puff. It's just harder to use, and it's not as good of a heal. And so, it's not as consistent, I would say, as Blissey is. And then the other choice is Leaf Tornado, which I actually really love on Eldegoss. It gives a movement speed increase to the team. It does some damage. I like it, but it's just a worse version of Helping Hands at this point. It does do damage, so that's great. But Helping Hand increases movement speed and basic attack speed for your team. It makes all of Blissey's attacks boosted attacks. And then once it gets upgraded, it increases damage of basic attacks for your team. That's crazy. It's crazy. It's so good. It's so good, especially when all of your damage are coming from people doing basic attacks. When all of your damage is coming from Greninja and Cinderace and Alolan Ninetales, I mean, what Blissey does is it kind of makes the caster mages not as viable, because what you can do with basic attacks is just so much more brutal. I've seen people say that Blissey will help Garchomp a little bit, and I can kind of see that. I kind of see the thought process behind that, but I think more often it's just going to make people like Greninja, Cinderace, Alolan Ninetales, as well as, helping Lucario with positioning and some basic attack damage once he lands. So I just think Blissey has come in, become the new god tier Pokemon, and everyone else just kind of has to fall in line. Wigglytuff is almost a second defender, so I could see a team running both Wigglytuff and Blissey if you want to just use Wiggly as that defender type Pokemon. So a viable team possibly when I'm talking about that is Blissey, a Snorlax as a defender, a Wigglytuff is kind of that second defender, and then two attackers. So you actually would drop someone like Lucario from the team. You don't necessarily need to do that, but it's totally viable and possible. The problem with Mime is I would just have other people in its place. I'm not counting on my support to be the one doing all the damage. That's not their job. You could kind of replace one of the caster attackers with Mr. Mime, And if you're really solid with barriers and stuff like that, you could create some pretty crazy scenarios. Again, Mr. Mime and Snorlax together, when you've got that barrier up and Snorlax is just pushing him into a barrier for like the crazy stuns, it's pretty awesome. But in general, I think when you're looking at a support and what that role kind of does for your team, I think Mr. Mime just doesn't perform that role well. It's more like a caster, like an attack damage, excuse me, not attack damage, but a special attack caster for your team. And I think at that, there are other people I would just rather have in that role. Maybe, genius level Mime, because of the barriers, could be there. But for the most part, I don't think so. Eldegoss, I think, is still really good, but I do think Blissey edges it out in just about every way. Maybe Eldegoss isn't even S tier anymore. Maybe this bumps Eldegoss down to A tier, just in front of Wiggly. Not that these orders are particularly, important, but it might bump it in front of Wiggly a bit. It might move it down to A tier. We're going to have to see, because what it's going to be is a battle between teams that run Eldegoss and teams that run Blissey. Some teams are going to say, no, we're sticking with Eldy, and we'll see how it goes. And other teams are going to run Blissey, and I think Blissey is going to beat those teams. So I could see Eldegoss being here still, possibly here. And that's what I think. That's where I think the master rank meta is right about now. I could even see some Pokemon moving down, unfortunately, because what happens is the best of the best are the best, and you don't really pick too many other people because you want the best thing possible. That's where I think it's at right now. It's important to have fun, and it's important to make sure that people know that, look, all this is, it's fun in games, right? So at some point, you just have to say that this is your new tier list, right? So that's why I'm saying that Talonflame, when you look at it big picture wise, no one does Talonflame's job. It's the best because you can't fly across the map with anyone else. You can't score the way Talonflame does. You can't push an entire team of people with a Unite move like Talonflame does. When played correctly, Talonflame is scoring every single goal in the game. The enemy can't even catch up with Talonflame. Even great Pokemon like Snorlax, Greninja, Ninetales. Oops, sorry, Ninetales shouldn't be here. Ninetales got, destroyed with this latest patch. But even Pokemon like Crustle can't keep up with Talonflame. Obviously, the Garchomp buffs make Garchomp S tier. There's no question. Zeraora is not going anywhere. I would run Talonflame and Zeraora on the same team with Garchomp. I would love to see that. Support-wise, Eldegoss still better than Blissey, but Mr. Mime is right there. Mr. Mime is right there. Incredible. Gengar, still one of the best Pokemon in the game. And Cinderace, strong, but not as strong. We see all our all-rounders are now in the B tier because of how good Garchomp is. There's no question. Garchomp is taking over. And Slowbro, that nerf made Slowbro. Honestly, Slowbro's in the let's talk category because that nerf made it almost useless. All the casters in the game are terrible right now. They're completely useless. You'd never want to use them at all. And the only thing I might change around here, you know what? If I'm being fair, I think Absol is probably B tier, and I think Gengar is probably S tier. So the meta is Speedster. Pick a Speedster. If you can have 2 Speedsters in a game, that's a win right there. So I hope that helped. Thanks for watching, everyone. I know this one was a little long, but I really do appreciate it. I love you all. I'll see you in the Master Rank. Get good with your Speedsters. They are the future. Goodbye.